This is part 2 of my conversation with John Mathis. Check out last week's episode, Near-Death Experiencer and Researcher John Mathis, B.A., RN, episode 99 for part 1. I met John last year at the IANDS conference, International Association for Near-Death Studies. John is a data scientist, nurse, Reiki Master, and has had more than one NDE. He also practices remote viewing and has had many OBEs, out-of-body experiences, including an experience when he was in college that was verified by his girlfriend at the time when he went to her parents' house out of body. It was really evidential and really interesting. Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened?
So one thing that stood out to me a little bit, and again, my apologies as a skeptical person, I have to ask, your bed was kicked and you went back into your body. Now, if you're dead, I mean, we would all just kick a bed and bring our loved ones back. So, and then you went back. So how do you explain that?
So I think there's a couple of things going on. I think because I'd been remote viewing for so long that it was easier for my consciousness to separate from my body. When I think about this, I think about Velcro, and there's like different strengths of Velcro. So it's like, I can hang a picture or I can hang a farm implement, depending upon how strong the Velcro is. So I think when you first have that experience of separation of consciousness from your physical body, it's like the industrial strength Velcro. You're so trained that they're one and the same that when you pull it apart, it's hard the first time. And, I remember when I was practicing remote viewing, the first few months, all I was doing was taking naps. because it was like I'm either awake or I'm asleep. It was like jumping off a cliff. And then later, as I kept practicing, it was then became like descending a ladder, and I could do it in steps. And then I learned if I could just stop, at step 2 or 3, I was in kind of that, hypnagogic state where, yeah, I'm kind of aware of the lawnmower running outside, but I'm also, watching, flying unicorns in my head.
In your coma, you're above your body. You heard your daughter saying, I want to paint his nails and put barrettes in, which is hilarious. I want to do that to my dad when I assume she was little, right? How old was she?
About 15.
Oh, okay. So she was kind of fucking with you. Because when I was 4,
Yeah,
I was like, Daddy,
absolutely.
can I put a... Okay. Oh, that's funny. So dark humor. I like that. So you get through shit like your dad in a coma. Okay. So I thought maybe she was like trying to be nice and wanting to do that for you. But that's really funny. Okay. So
it's a way teenagers show love.
yes. Especially ones with like good humor. That is very funny. So then... we don't need to repeat what your mom said, but then the first thing you heard was your mom saying that. Now, one you were hearing in your body and the other you were hearing outside. Was it physiologically, sensationally different? Because that was obviously a strong distinction you made by saying the first thing I heard was my mom saying this, but you were also reporting multiple things you heard. So how was it experientially different for you?
So when you're hearing with human ears, there's background noise. So like when we're talking, the dog's barking and, there's bugs outside and the air conditioner turns on, there's all that background noise that, we tune out. But when I'm hearing with my consciousness or when I'm remote viewing, it's like I'm grabbing a digital sample of just that. There's no other noise. There's no other background. It is just that signal.
So how did you revisit this near-death experience or return to it 7 years later?
So my mom passed away in 2011. I was living in the Chicagoland area, so I moved down to Sarasota to basically be the executor as well as to take care of the physical because she'd been a hoarder for about a decade. So I spent probably 9-10 months going through all that process, doing the legal stuff, and as well as essentially gutting the condo from the waist down and building it back out again. At the end of that process, I'm getting ready to put the condo on the market. It's almost completely done. At the same time, there was a drought in Florida, and when you walk across the grass, you can hear it crunch. That's how bad it was. Well, I wake up one morning. It's maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's still kind of twilight outside. But I wake up and I'm in that kind of groggy state, and I see my dad standing in the doorway of the bedroom. And he's kind of leaning up against the door frame, and he's just kind of looking around and nodding his head and, look of appreciation. And then he looks over at me and goes, you did okay, JB. And I'm like, oh, so much gratitude. I love that. I love that feeling. That
He feel as real as when your grandfather visited?
Yes.
Okay. So you think those are real? Okay. Continue, please.
So I have that kind of wash of gratitude from him. And then I hear rain on the roof. And we had a lanai out back and it had a metal roof. So the rain on the roof had a very distinctive sound. And I'm like, oh my God, is that rain? And the next thing I hear is this music. And the only thing I can compare it to would be listening to like Enya style music. Or Bobby McFerrin had a album out a while back called Circle Songs, where it's all just kind of melodies and no words, but it's always kind of melody, and it's interwoven and just changes keys, and a lot, very much like jazz. But I'm listening to this, and it was like, oh my God, that's the plants. The plants are singing in gratitude for the rain. And then that's when I had the pop, and I'm back into my near-death experience, except I'm watching it like a movie. And I going through the tunnel, getting the download, seeing George. And right when I'm there with George looks up into the crowd, and so I'm standing in what looks like a soccer pitch, but as I'm looking around, it's actually a Quidditch pitch from Harry Potter, because it's got the 3 rings on each side. And I'm looking up, and it's like, oh, this is the World Cup from Harry Potter, because the stadiums actually went up into the clouds. But I'm looking at the crowd, and it's every different type of person, every color, every age range, every era. Some people weren't even people. Something weren't even physical. Some of them looked like opalescent boogie boards or surfboards. But George looks at everybody and goes, hey, everybody, this is John. And the whole place is like, hi, John. And then George looks out, he goes, hey, everybody, John's from Earth. And the whole place went, ooh. And I'm like, what the hell is the ooh for? I mean, it's just Earth. I mean, this is heaven. This is the cool place, not Earth. And immediately I got back, no, Earth is hard. I'm like, really? And immediately the download begins. Earth is hard. It's advanced souls only. You have to earn your way to an earthly existence. Some of your spirit guides will block you from trying to come in, because you will get bruised and battered here. Some of us look at us like reality TV, and they'll watch our lives to see how we go through and survive these problems. I'm like, well, what's so difficult about it? What's throwing you? And they said, well, there's so many places you can exist in a spiritual, energetic existence. And then a little harder would be, okay, now you're in a physical existence, and you've got to experience death and suffering and pain. And then there's some places that's even more advanced where they combine the two together. And then you've got to reconcile your spiritual nature versus your physical nature. And I'm like, well, that's Earth. And they're like, no, Earth is so much harder because there's duplicity. People will tell you one thing, but they mean something else, and you'll not be able to read that. And so now you've got the additional complication of not only you trying to reconcile the 2 different parts of yourself, but now you have to question everything that you see, hear, and do. Like, well, now that you say that, is kind of fucked up. And I'm like, why do we come in here not knowing what we're getting into? And they're like, well, sometimes the person that killed you in a previous life is going to be your spouse in this life. And you can't have that knowledge because it front loads and it biases you. So every time you come in, it's almost like community theater. Last season, that person was the villain. But this season, this person's going to be your wife or spouse or best friend. And you can't use that character frame of reference. So that's part of the reason why they wipe the slate clean and drop you in. I'm like, okay, well, now that you explain it that way, it does kind of suck. I don't want to go back. And they're like, okay, well, you don't have to go back, but you need to understand the consequences. And what they did is they showed me a game of chutes and ladders. And they said, as you move through life, you'll have your ups and downs, but the longer you play, you'll eventually win. If you stop in the middle of the game, you'll have to start all over again. And at this time, I was like, holy shit, after 40 years, I've been through enough crap. I don't want to do that again. So, how much worse can it be? Let me just jump back in and, finish up the game. And okay. that's where I came back in version 1.0. But in this director's cut, that's when I started hearing music. And I'm like, oh, what's that? And again, I've been singing since I was 6. With a name like Johnny Mathis, music has always been thrown at me. So I've been singing since I was 6, singing opera since I was 17, singing with community theater and operatic choirs since 20. So music is almost like a language to me. And I was hearing this language of music. And I'm like, oh my God, what is that? And then, all my focus went to that. And as I noticed, it was like I started to rise up into that music. And I saw the same kind of thing. I'm seeing something that looked like angels, something that looked like, opal surfboards, something that looked like people, but they're all just kind of like waving around, and they all had kind of a glow that changed with the pitch of the music. So I'm in all these kind of like swirl of lights and sounds, and it was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. So I started singing with them and, doing the same thing they were and playing with the music and the chords and the intonation. And all of a sudden I just kind of like looked down and my body is gone. I'm now like one of those silver surfboard looking things. And I'm like, oh God, this is rapturous. That's the word I would use, rapturous. And I'm just like, yes, give me the bliss. And then I get horse collared. Something grabs me like the back of my shirt that doesn't exist. And I'm like, wah! And it pulls me back down. And now I'm back standing in front of George again. And frankly, I'm a little pissed. And I'm like, what the hell? And I turn around and I'm looking at Archangel Michael. And he looks at me. He's got a grin on his face, puts one hand on my shoulder, puts another hand on the other shoulder, and he pulls me in a little bit, and he goes, you belong to us now. Okay. I don't know what that means, but okay. And there's a whole kind of thing with Archangel Michael that doesn't follow linear time. I don't know if you want to get into that hot mess. But after I had a conversation with Michael, then it was like, okay, here's the chutes and ladders. Are you ready to go? Yeah, I'm ready to go. And then that's when my bed got hit by the laundry cart.
Well, and then that's what you paralleled 7 years later. So
yeah.
Now I will have a couple. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, what do I say? So much to process. There's so much.
I do this to so many people. I'm used to it by now.
Yeah. It's first.
I do want to say, damn it, man, talking with you is like dropping acid. And I'm like, thank you.
I know. I don't even need to do drugs with what I do with my podcast and reading. I'm like, I could just skip that whole part of life. Which I'm kind of scared of drugs.
You never know.
Maybe. I'm kind of scared of doing drugs, but I'm also curious. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll let everyone know if I do and what happens. Watch like nothing happens because I researched this too much. I'm like, nothing. But
yeah, I had a ketamine experience, but that's maybe another podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's just so much rich content already. And I do want to say one thing that's just, I want to observe, and then I wouldn't mind going into the nature of time that you experienced, I guess, through Archangel Michael. But the first time you weren't completely physiologically dead the way some people are. And the second time you weren't even ill or at the risk of passing. So this makes me think, I mean, everyone I know who writes in or talks about this, myself included, we're all like, oh my God, I would love to have a near-death experience, that level. Maybe some people have had slight remote viewing. I've had some possible out-of-body experiences, but not even close. I mean, a near-death experience, oh my God, seeing my dad, getting that level of realer than real, which I I guess I'm making assumption, was this realer than real? That's a consistency in NDEs. Was it that for you?
Right.
Okay. Yes. So if we could just have this, it sounds like you'd already been having so much for years. If we could have this without having to actually risk dying and all the consequences of healing from that, sounds like it's something maybe a very advanced people could have. And I guess some people have during shared death experiences. Is that what you would say after your experience? That if some, maybe not everybody, I don't know if I could get to this point, but where if you get advanced enough with, you use the Velcro analogy with separating your physical and non-physical, you could go to probably an entry level layer of the other side. Yes?
I would absolutely agree with that, because just like anything else with the physiology of the body, you have muscle memory, and the more you do something, the more adept you become to it. Meditation is a practice. It's not something you can just do. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. Same thing with remote viewing, past lives, whatever. Again, when I first started, I would wake up with a trail of drool on my pillow. So I started setting an alarm for 15 minutes, and the alarm saved me a lot. But every once in a while, I would find that, I can stop at this rung of the ladder of consciousness, and it became like lucid dreaming. And again, the way when I teach classes, the way I teach that is like the ladder of consciousness. One or two steps down the ladder of consciousness, you're in that dream state where you're kind of aware of what's going on in the room, but you're also kind of not. Another step down would be remote viewing, where, I can hear you ask me, are you on location? What do you see? And you have that handler who is, interacting with you. Then you go to that point where you're no longer conscious, but you are still using intention to move through that space. And so, that's where, your dream time is, or lucid dreaming. So it's all out of body, but it's within that ladder of consciousness, and where you can, choose to plug in. A little bit about IANDS too is that my experience with IANDS between 2011 and 2013-14 was that they were very specific. And again, I'm going to lean more into the academic side of things.
And this is IANDS, where we met, International Association of Near-Death Studies. Okay.
Correct. IANDS was started by researchers and clinicians, and so that's their foundation. And when my left brain wanted to really understand what was going on, IANDS made a lot of sense to me. But what I discovered was that, again, in their academic approach, they were saying, no, this is a near-death experience. And, you had to be in harm's way. You had to have an organ system stop. Did you flatline? Did you stop breathing? Were your EKGs or EEGs flat? So it was, very evidential that this person was quote unquote dead. But it left out a lot of other things, like persons like myself. It was like, if it weren't for those interventions, I would have been dead. But it was like an organ system would fail. Well, let's plug him into something. That failed. Let's plug him into something. So that's where I don't know where to go with that. And again, within that scope of IANDS during that time frame, they had a near-death experience, an NDE, and then they had a small case N with an NDE, which was a near-death experience. And that was before the group ASSIST came along, American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. We'll stick with ASSIST. When I discovered ASSIST in around 14, 15, it spoke to the nurse in me, because they weren't so interested in quantifying the experience. They were more interested in, how do we help the person through that reentry turbulence to reintegrating into society with these new skills, or this new operating system that they have on board. And one, I needed that for myself, but two, it spoke out to the nurse in me. And so that's why for a few years, I went into assist, became a peer counselor, and started helping other people through that reentry turbulence. Since then, IANDS have become more inclusive, and they invite people who have both a spiritually transformative experience, which would be that near death, and the near death experience. And that's really good from a psychological point of view, too, because if it takes you a few years to finally come out to someone and say, I had this near death experience, and then someone in front of you says, no, I've got this list of tick boxes here and you don't check all the boxes, so I can't validate your experience. That's really harmful from a psychological point of view. So I'm glad they made the pivot to be more inclusive, but to all of that to answer your question, did I technically die? No. But if I did not have interventions, would I have? Yes.
The first time, but not the second, correct?
Correct. Right. Absolutely
but
correct.
Were they both realer than real? Did they feel the same? Okay. And so that could give us hope. Maybe, all of us could reach that. I would certainly want to. Now,
hi, everyone. I am so excited to let you know it's finally here. Book 2 in the What the Fuck Just Happened series is ready for pre-order on Amazon, and it will be officially live August 15th and then available everywhere. And yes, I can now say that WTF Just Happened is actually a series. That's also super exciting and kind of surreal. This book is titled WTF Just Happened? A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog. In this book, I continue my exploration of an afterlife. I get some amazing signs, more medium readings. I learn about remote viewing and out-of-body experiences. I take classes with mediums. And yes, some absolutely inexplicable what the fucks keep happening. And on a side story, that was a different kind of what the fuck, my dog Peanut, who is now, unfortunately, on the other side, unexpectedly comes in to help fight for justice and becomes kind of famous in the process. It will publish everywhere in ebook and print on August 15th. For now, you can pre-order the ebook on Amazon.
Yeah, so I do want to ask you then, right before I get into your research, so it was realer than real. Why do you think it was real and not a hallucination? How did it differ from this world, being here in this world, and how did it differ from a dream or hallucination?
So usually when you want to remember something, you have the intention. Where did I put my keys? And then your brain goes through the process. I didn't lie there in bed after seeing my dad and experiencing that, that beautiful satori of nature singing to pop back into my body or, pop into that experience, because my memory of that experience did not include music. So there was no memory for me to trigger off of to go back to that. The other thing is that in that experience, I acquired knowledge that I would not have had if it was a reiteration of something. Like if I had read something somewhere and then I reinterpreted it through, my subconscious, then maybe it'd been like the George Carlin As My Dad type of situation, where I took one thing and then transposed it onto something else so that I could, receive the message. In my mind, there was There was nothing there for it to trigger. And as I replayed it, I wasn't in it. I was observing it as a third party. So it was a different experience. It wasn't like replaying the same cassette or replaying the same tape. And then the information that I got through that Archangel Michael thing, it was different because I thought I met Archangel Michael in 2009, and then he showed up, at 2012 during my recall. And in 2012, he was like, "Hey, funny thing, I've been with you since '89," and showed me some stupid things that I was doing in '89, remote viewing haunted houses and trying to clear out demons, that he had to intervene and save my ass. And he was like, "Yeah, so that big bright light that saved you, that was me. That person that pulled you out of that basement and told you don't go in that dark room, that was me." So that's where I say it's very complicated. It's outside linear time, and I feel like I've already been messing with people for the past hour and a half. So I don't want to throw that on you unless you want to edit it and move it around or do that do that voodoo that you do.
No, I think myself, there's Pickles, my dog, saying hi to everyone again. I can't stop him. I'm fascinated by how time isn't linear. I think a lot of the people listen to this are very fascinated by physics and science. So, yeah, very interested in how time is not as linear as we perceive it. And there's a lot of studies done by Einstein and that. I touch upon them in my book. That was sort of the very first thing that opened my mind to the possibility of survival of consciousness. But yeah, so if you have some kind of quick, fascinating thing on it, but with your expertise in near-death experience research, it's been an hour and a half. We haven't even gotten into that. So is there a quick thing you want to say about any insights you got into the nature of time?
I think time is necessary for us in 3D reality so that we can process events and things, happen step by step. Because, for example, if you're Benjamin Buttons or whatever, and you're born and you're in this, infant state, and then all of a sudden you're remembering a tragic accident or a relationship that goes bad, you don't have the ability to accommodate to that. So I think linear time is actually kind of like a restrictor plate on a race car. It doesn't allow you to go too fast. It allows you to accommodate to changes. It allows you to. The other thing too, when they talk about manifesting and The Secret or whatever those books, man, I can't tell you how many times I would have blown up cars when I'm driving in traffic. I used to live in Jersey. Used to drive around Orlando, and if I was moving cars with my mind to get them out of there, it would have been a hot mess. So I think linear time is a grace, and it allows us to process things in a fashion that allows us to accommodate to those changes and to learning. That being said, with remote viewing, you can go outside of time. One of my first learnings was I said, take me someplace, take me to the Eiffel Tower. And instead of going to the Eiffel Tower when I had seen it the year before, I went to it while it was being built. And so there's a time component too. So that's how I realized that, again, when you're in your conscious body, time and space don't matter. It matters here where Newtonian physics plays a role. And again, if that's all you understand, then you won't experience that. But when you keep knocking on the door of consciousness research, you're going to start learning stuff. And as you learn and accommodate to that, they're like, oh, again, whatever magic hand is in the background, they're like, oh, this person's ready for this new knowledge now. And so then you accommodate to that knowledge. And that's where I think linear time is really helpful.
Yeah. Time's one of the biggest mysteries, and I don't even know what to say. I'm going to just kind of digest the fact that it seems to be different than how we perceive it here, because that's just really unfathomable to us here. But now one thing that's, you've done that's amazing. So you've done research on NDEs through IANDS. And if I'm correct, you've studied and researched about 300 NDE experiencers stories. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So when I first discovered IANDS, I was living down in Sarasota, and I went to the Sarasota chapter there, and said, hey, I'm an experiencer. I think I had a near-death experience. I told my story to Judith, and she was like, "Yep, that sounds like it. Why don't you come and sit in?" Went to a couple, and then I'm like, can I tell my story? And they're like, "Yeah, sure, tell your story." And when I told it, people's mouths were hanging open. And so it's like, yeah, keep telling your story, and maybe you need to get involved, and yada yada. And I said, well, I do clinical data management. Maybe I can help with a database or something. And so that rolled out to me signing a non-disclosure agreement and getting handed a little over 200 cases and questionnaires of people who had said they had a near-death experience that was investigated, and put that together into a database. And then a couple years later, that data, along with other folks, was presented by Dr. Bruce Grayson at I think it was a 2015 conference for IANDS. But in that cohort, and then since 2015, the books I've read, the people I've helped, the other research I've done, that's where I kind of came up with probably around 300. But of that cohort, there seems to be some trends: going to the tunnel, going to the white light, seeing a intelligence, getting a download, coming back and writing a book about it. That seems to be part of the paradigm as well. But that's the thing that unifies the experience. But every person is different. Every person's had different experiences. And so, if you see, a Chihuahua, you may be, oh, what a pretty little dog. Well, in my experience, I've been bitten several times by Chihuahuas. So I don't have that same association. So
I've had a Chihuahua. I loved her. And my dog now, I thought was a Chihuahua mix, but we did DNA test. He's not. So sorry. There's a huge difference. Chihuahua's like my favorite dog. So go on.
I'm glad they have a lover out there. I've got a Lab Rottie mix that I absolutely adore. She's a 75-pound lap dog. But my family too had a Chihuahua, and her modus operandi was bite first, ask questions later. Right. So the Chihuahua reference is basically explaining your experience with something will be different from my experience with something. Some of them are unified, but some of them are different. So like when people see angels, well, we're in North America. It's a heavily Judeo-Christian country. Maybe some Abrahamic religions thrown in there as well, but they all have kind of the angel metaphor. And so I can understand why we all see quote unquote angels, because they all kind of have that same meaning. But if I've been bit by a Chihuahua, my difference is going to be different than yours. So I think that's why near-death experiencers have diversity, because they go through and find something that conveys the message. When you look at the message overall of near-death experiencers, a large amount of them come back with the intention of making the world a better place, or they want to course correct and they want to make themselves better. But I don't know of any case where someone has come back and they decided they want to become a titan of industry and become part of the 1%ers. It's the opposite. And so whatever imagery, whatever experience you needed to course correct or make that change is what you saw. But those are the accoutrements that are added on to the experience of the tunnel, the white room, the intelligence, the download, and the return.
You said why you thought your NDE was genuine and not a hallucination. When you combine all this research, why do you think that's the case?
I think it was the case because I am so different afterward. And I was different from a psychological point of view, but I was different in a extrasensory point of view. So before my near-death experience, I was in pharmaceutical research, making six figures. The family vacation was to go to Europe for 3 months and tour all the castles that we could see in Harry Potter. When I came back, I said to my ex, I said, "Can we take that money, buy medical supplies, and then go out to the Four Corners area and provide health care to the indigenous people out there?" Uh, her response was something to akin of, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" Or "Who is this?" So it was one of those situations where I looked like the same person when I came back, but I was fundamentally not. Same thing too is like materialistic things had no value for me whatsoever. I would watch commercials on TV and I would laugh at the commercials because they were so obviously faked and so obviously driving at commercialism and classism, and the people around me didn't see that. But that's the psychological aspect. There's something within the near-death community that they call sliders, or SLI for street light interference. And for about the first 2 or 3 months I was back, if I went out walking, the street lights would come on as I would walk under. And it didn't matter whether it was day or night. I'd walk under and the lights would go on. Or if I was in someone's home and they had like the tube lights, the fluorescent lights with had the ballast. And when the ballast goes bad, they're partially energized. You can kind of see them twinkle and glow. I would walk under lights like that and they would start to twinkle and glow. So I had these physiological changes as well as emotional changes.
Wow. Okay. And now I have two final questions because we're going on almost 2 hours. This is what happens when you talk to someone who's had multiple experiences and their own NDE and researches 300 NDEs. You put them in front of a curious skeptic like me. You take 2 hours of their life. So I'm going to ask you, of all the multiple NDEs you studied, is there one that stands out as the most veridical, evidential one?
I'll have to defer to other people on that because I was more interested in verifying my own experience. Because again, it was like my entire lifetime had been, doing abnormal things, talking to ghosts or remote viewing and past lives, Reiki. And then finally it was like, oh, I finally did it. I broke my brain. So to have that body of knowledge and experience in front of me, yes, I was putting together a database, but I was also going through and saying, oh, okay, I did that too. I guess I'm not crazy, or I'm as crazy as this person. And that's one thing I found in my research was that most of the time, a near-death experiencer just needs to have someone validate their experience. Just listen to them and say, I know that's possible. Just give them a toehold. And that will be so helpful. So in my experience, where I was coming from is, did I break my brain or not? And then after that, it was then, okay, in this dissonance of reentry, how can I make myself better? And how can I help others in that process? Trying to go through and say, okay, in this experience, you floated above your body and there's a sock on top of a machine that someone put there to see if you would see it. I didn't follow that. And in the research I had, it was, again, about the experience, and the experiencer themselves weren't necessarily thinking like a clinician, weren't trying to prove the experience. They were still in the point of, I'm trying to rationalize this experience. I know there's other research out there. I know there's that kid that was, talking about he was a World War II pilot and had, dropped fuel tanks.
Dr. Jim Tucker. That's past life memories. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ton of evidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ton
so
of vertical.
I personally didn't go down that particular road.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, I think the first part's pretty clear. What did you used to think the afterlife was like? I'm assuming Judeo-Christian biblical, but I'm curious how much you believed that versus what do you feel now about an afterlife?
So I grew up in the Catholic Church, but I've been questioning it since I was about 14, and spent a lot of time in detention in high school questioning my religion teachers. But when Grandpa came to visit me at 9 years old, I knew death wasn't the end. But I also didn't know what was on the other side. And so there was that fear of the unknown. And so when people ask me now, are you afraid of dying? No, I'm afraid of not getting everything done I want to get done. Then before that, it was like, are you afraid of death? Yes. Why? Because it might hurt. But are you afraid of going to hell? No. Are you afraid that when you die, that's it? No. Those fears I suspected were not correct before my near-death experience, and I'm confident they don't exist after my near-death experience. And there's all sorts of other, ancillary, the people that have had the past life memories, the reincarnation concept. I think there's plenty of other evidence out there to show that this meat suit that we're driving around in is just a chapter in a very, very big book. And again, with my past lives, it's like, okay, I know 12 of my other chapters. So again, I feel like it feels permanent, but it's not. It's the consciousness that's permanent.
Great.
Hi, I will be attending the IANDS, International Association for Near-Death Studies Conference. And I would love to invite all of you. I will let Kimberly Braun, who had an NDE and is the panelist, coordinator, and mentor for this conference, tell you more about it now.
Everyone that is there for the reasons of why are we here in this world? What is this world about? And how is this world, as we define it, part of something larger? So these individuals that present, and I'm blessed to be among them again, will share not only their experience, but how all their life is changed and continues to change, affected by these experiences. Powerful conference.
And there were some really kind of big names there too. Last year, I got to meet, excuse my little bit of name dropping, but Dr. Bruce Grayson, which for me was really exciting. So pretty big scientists are involved too. And it's very serious. Along with the spiritual component, it's very evidence-based too and research-based.
I encourage you to go to the link to the conference, which is conference.iands.org. And the lineup for the speakers is presented there really in a very clear way. Since I'm working with the panelists, I can name a couple of the panel titles. So we grouped them into themes this year. Trauma panel. So those that have experienced trauma, loss of a loved one fits right in that category. how NDEs, STEs, and OBEs changed their life purpose, after effects of an NDE, and family dynamics. Special abilities is another panel on mediumship. But if you look at the schedule, you'll see there's scientific oriented panels as well. What those would be is that they would be the presentation of the fruit of the research that these particular scientists have found when they've been studying NDEs.
Amber Kasich, who has been on this podcast, she and I are going to be doing a presentation as well at the conference. It's so nice to see some of all of you who listen and support.
And you can get tickets at the website conference.iands.org. And just as a note, there's always member specials. So being a member of IANDS is very inexpensive.
Thank you so much. This was I could keep you another 2 hours. Unfortunately, I have other things I have to do because I don't want to end this. But tell our listeners, where can they find you, follow you, any final things you want to share with them?
So I have a website. It's called johnmathis.me. And it is basically a link tree with fun stories. But if you want to pick up my books that I've written two. One's for the young adult reader. One's for kind of a spirituality for men. The young adult reader book is The Alchemist's Heir, H-E-I-R. And it's basically a grandpa teaching his grandson about metaphysical stuff. My second book is called Guitars, Cigars, and Tiki Bars, A Guy's Guide to Spirituality, where basically it's a form of myself getting day drunk in a tiki bar, and a guy comes in to day drink with me, and we talk about metaphysics. I also teach classes. I teach remote viewing. I teach people about metaphysics. I work with people who have experimented with remote viewing and metaphysics stuff, near-death experience, that whole kind of re-entry process. I mean, when you break someone's paradigm down, there needs to be someone there to listen. And that's where I feel like I'm really good at. So I got my shingle out there as well. And I've got about 40 YouTube videos out there where I basically build a fire out on my deck, light up a cigar, and I just start talking about some sort of metaphysical thing that may be in the news or it happened lately. Something that is unusual, like, remote viewing the moon, or something I learned from Joe McGonigal, or you never know what you're going to get, but it's all going to be in that, kind of the metaphysical wheelhouse.
Great. Thank you so much. I will include links to this in the show notes. So thank you. I appreciate this. I appreciate your time and knowledge and vast body of knowledge and wisdom.
I am so glad I sold you on that.
Yeah.
No, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting you at IANDS in DC. I'm glad we connected.
Me too.
To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_ happened_, or email me at hello@wtfjusthappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?